All right. So transformations with trig functions. Everybody can see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. So today we're going to do transformations of sine and cosine. So sinusoidal functions are a transformation of the basic sine and cosine graphs. Sinusoidal functions are often written in descriptive form, y equals a sine bx minus h plus k, or y equals a cos bx minus h plus k. So it looks very familiar to what we did in transformations in the first unit, where it was y equals a f of bx minus c plus d. Do you remember that? It looks very similar, except I'm not using an f for function. I'm using sine and cosine. However, I'm going to show you a different way for graphing this versus transformations. It's very similar to what we did for transformations, but it's a lot easier if you kind of gravitate towards these steps. So first off, the period has to do with which letter? A, B, H, or K? Does anybody know? You can just shout it out. Okay, nobody wants to say because I'm recording. Okay, B. So that means the period is the absolute value of 2 pi divided by B. It's absolute value because the period is a measure of length. Amplitude has to do with the A value, and again, it's an absolute value because it's measuring the length. The median line, like yesterday's lesson, we did a sine and a cosine graph, and the median line, or the axis I referred to it as, was always on the x-axis, but now it's going to be shifted up and down, and that has to do with your k. So if you think about that for a second, if normally your minimum is like of a basic sine graph is from -1 to 1, so minimum is -1, maximum is +1, what would affect that? Well, that would be affected by your k and then how much your amplitude is. So your minimum would be your k minus your absolute value of A, and your max would be your k plus the absolute value of A. And your phase shift, or the horizontal shift, has to do with your H. I know there's different letters here, but they all kind of mean the same in that spot, okay? So here's kind of your algorithm for graphing today. Always find the period and the amplitude first. Then we're going to locate the median. The median is the middle, halfway between the max and the min, just in case you didn't understand that. I use a dotted line to draw, and we're going to draw it at whatever your k value is, okay? Then we're going to use the amplitude to draw dotted lines at the max and the min y values, and that's by calculating k plus the amplitude, or k subtract the amplitude. And then we're going to label the x-axis using the period we just calculated in the first step, and the value of the period goes on the 2 pi tick. And I'm going to explain that in a second. Finally, plot the key sine, cosine 5 dots, 3 spots. This is a huge thing. I'll refer to 5 dots, 3 spots a lot. Starting at the H shift as the first point, and a period later is the 5th point, and then it's because it's all nice and symmetrical, the rest of the dots are all halfway. And A, if A is negative, remember that you're going to be reflecting it over the x-axis. Okay, so I want to refresh your memory here of what a sine graph looks like. So here is my y equals sine theta. Okay. So a sine graph starts at the median and recycles itself a period later. So you have the first spot would be at the median. Then you would connect the second spot. And then halfway is your third spot. Halfway between that is your fourth. Oops, let me just undo that. Sorry. Halfway between that would be your fourth spot. And halfway between that would be your fifth spot. Okay, the difference between sine and cosine is, here is, oops, cosine. We have the cos starting at the max and then comes back and starts all again at the max again. So here's your first spot, your second spot, halfway would be the minimum. So third spot, I didn't draw this very good. Let me just draw that again. It doesn't look very symmetrical, is what I'm going at. Oh my gosh. There. There we go. So here's spot number 1, spot number 2, halfway is spot number 3, and then halfway between that, spot number 4, spot number 5. So you can see the 5 spots differ based on whether it was a cosine or sine graph. Okay. So we're kind of spending 2 days on this because the next day is we're giving the graph and then you have to come up with the equation. So we're working backwards. And by the time you finish that, you kind of got it all together. Okay, so step number 1, always find the period. So this is what my P stands for. Period is, again, 2 pi divided by the absolute value of B. So my B is, does everybody see it's 4? So it's going to be 2 pi divided by 4. So that reduces down to pi over 2. Okay. My A, here's my A right there, is a half. So it's the absolute value of a half, right? Which is just a half. Okay, so now that I've figured out my period and my amplitude, I'm going to look to see what my median is. My median is the axis. If you don't see one, it's 0, right? Okay, so that means on this axis, my median is here. On the actual axis, it didn't get shifted up or down. Okay, my amplitude is a half. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a tick here at a half. Whoops, my pen's not working too good. And I'm going to put a dotted line there. And then I'm going to put a tick at negative a half and put a dotted line there. Okay, so then I have basically the range that this wave is going to go through. I think I like my other battery better here. I'm going to switch. Okay, so then does everybody see visually? You can actually see what the min and the max is. You could also do it algebraically. If this was on a test and I didn't get you to graph this, it's your K, subtract your amplitude. Your absolute value of the amplitude gives you negative a half. And your max is your K plus your amplitude, which is positive a half. So you can either get it from getting your median and then going up your amplitude to get your max and then down your amplitude to get your min. Okay, there was no horizontal shift, so we're just going to put 0. So normally, again, if I look up here, it's a sine graph. Do you see? It's a sine. So this is how we're going to do our spots. Okay, so I said that the period was pi over 2. So that means if there is no shifting, that means my graph is going to look exactly like this, except in the second spot, it's not going to be 2 pi, it's going to be actually pi over 2. So here's my first spot, my second spot. Then we do a halfway. So halfway between pi over 2 is pi over 4. And that will be at a median as well. Do you see I'm mirroring this? 1, 1, 2, 3. Then halfway between 0 and pi over 4, you can put a tick. You don't have to label the amount because you're already establishing scale. Just watch, if you put a tick there, you got to put a tick there. So I have my 4th spot and my 5th spot, and then I just connect the dots. Notice that this graph looks exactly the same as my graph did yesterday as a base graph. This is why I'm saying we're not doing the same method, because you can see that this 4 shrunk my period, right? It shrunk horizontally, but it doesn't look like it the way I drew it. It's just because I spread out the scale of my x-axis, right? So this would be x, and this would be y. Okay, so a lot of the times the graphs will look identical, but you got to look at what the coordinates are. Okay, so when you're checking your answers in the back of the book, make sure you're looking at the actual coordinates where the max, the median, the minimum are, to see if you're correct. Because you could say, oh, I got a wave. They all look like waves. That doesn't mean you're doing it right. Just drawing a wave does not give you points, right? The points have to go through particular things. Okay, any questions on example 1 there? All right, let's try the next one. Okay, so this time it's a cosine graph. Just to refresh your memory, a cosine graph here starts at a max, a period later it's at its max again, then halfway it's at a minimum, and halfway is the median. So you got to know, so you kind of have to memorize where the cosine graph and the sine graph start. Okay, so again, first thing is we figure out the period. The period again is 2 pi . 2 pi, oh my, 2 pi, I'll try that again, oh my gosh, divide by p. Do you have a pen? Okay, I'm just going to try it on a different pen. Give me a second.
Try this, Valerie, if you want.
Okay, I'm going to switch pens. Maybe it's a pen thing. Okay, we'll try this again. Okay, so 2 pi divided by b, absolute value of b. Oh, this is better. Okay, so this is 2 pi divided by, do you see my b is pi this time? Interesting, hey? Remember, your b is whatever is multiplied by your x. And you might say, oh, aren't you supposed to factor that out? By the way, this right here, the +2, this is actually inside the brackets. There is no horizontal shift. It's not shifting left or right. It just has the b in there. So sometimes if they don't have brackets, like if you can see the c, a lot of times they only put brackets when you have a shift. The +2 is the vertical shift, not the horizontal shift, okay? So the pi's cancel, and we get 2 as our period. And then if it doesn't have anything for a number there, it's understood that the amplitude is 1. Now, in this case, the k, that's my k right there. The k got shifted up 2. So we're going to start with our k. So 1, 2, 3. So my k is at 2. Okay. Then my amplitude means I'm going up 1 to a maximum of 3 and down 1 to a maximum of 1. Okay, so does everybody see how I got that? So then the next step is starting at the cosine. Remember, cosine, again, you'll have to memorize, it's starting at a maximum and then a maximum later. So my period is 2. So I need to put 2 where I say the 2 tick spot is. And there's the 1, there's the halfway, the halfway. So cosine is at a max A max later is a period later. Halfway is a min. Halfway between that is a median. Halfway between that is another median. Yada, yada. Here we go. As easy as that. Any questions? Label my X and my Y.
Wait, could you go over how you got the max and the mid again? I missed that.
Okay, so do you understand how I got my K?
Yeah.
And then the amplitude. So do you see, here is my K, and that's going up one amplitude, and that's going down one amplitude. So that's how I'm getting my min and my max. Kind of like when I have here, I kind of wrote down, I don't expect you to memorize this. I think you should understand that the minimum is the median subtract the amplitude, and the max is the median plus the amplitude. Like I wrote it down, but I think I want you to understand that part of it more than just pure memorizing it. Okay. Any other questions on that one? So notice how the transformations unit in the first unit would not really help you for this type of graphing, right? Because the x-axis is changing. It's not going up by pi this time. It was actually going up by, you know, technically a half there, right? So that's why it's really important you have to put your scale, because it's not just a matter of ticks now. You have to be able to tell me what they are. So notice the last one, the x-axis was going up by technically pi over 8 here, right? And the y was going up by a half. This time, for example B, the x's were going up by a half, and the y's were going up by 1. So the scale is super important here. Okay, so we'll try C. The period is, so there's a B there. You see it's 1. So 2 pi divided by 1 is just 2 pi, which means my tick here would be 2 pi in that normal spot. Okay. There's my amplitude, 2. And if it's negative, it just means it's a reflection. There's no plus K, so K is 0, which means you can put the, I like using a dotted line just so I can know that my wave is within the range of it. So because my amplitude is 2, I'm going to put a 2 here and a negative 2 here. There is my max, and there is my minimum. Okay. Now, there is a shift. Can anybody tell me which way it's shifting? Is it going left or right?
Left.
Shut it up. It is going left. Very good. Shift left. So that means, because it's a sine graph, if I go back to what my sine graph looks like, do you see my sine graph looks like it starts at the median, and then a period later it's at its median. I'm going to be shifting that now left, pi over 4, which now, the way I did my scale, I have a 2 pi. Well, I may not want to have 2 pi as my ticks now, right? This is 3 pi over 2. This is pi over 2. My ticks won't be enough. I need to do extra ticks here to get the pi over 4s. Do you see what I'm saying? So there's the negative pi over 4. This would be the pi over 4. Do you see my extra ticks now will show the pi's over 4s? You don't have to label each tick, but the ticks have to make sense of what the scale is, right? So although I didn't label, I could label this as 3 pi over 4. I don't need to label every tick, because once I establish the scale, I should know what those ticks mean. Okay. So it's saying my sine graph got shifted left pi over 4, which means that first dot is at negative pi over 4. A period later, which is 2 pi, because it normally is from 0 to 2 pi, it got shifted left. Now it's going to be at the tick at the left. Do you see how I'm getting that? It's still measuring 2 pi. It's just the whole thing got shifted to the left. And then halfway between that, normally halfway would be the pi, but then it got shifted to the left. So there's my other one, okay? So, and again, a sine graph starts at the median, goes up and comes back down. So my fourth thought is halfway between the negative pi over 4 and 3 pi over 4, which normally would be at pi over 2, but it got shifted, so now it's right there. And then same with this one, normally it would be at 3 pi over 2, but it got shifted, so now it's down here. Yada, yada. As easy as that, right? Label my x, label my y. Any questions there? Questions? Okay. Let's do the next one. Okay. Notice that the 2x minus pi, this is exactly like we had in the first unit. You have to have the b factored out. So if you go back to this beginning, notice that the b here is factored out. It's still necessary to do to see the phase shift properly. Okay, so remember that the b has to be factored out. Okay. Oops, I'm getting all crazy here. All right, so I'm going to rewrite this with the b factored out. So it's going to be 2 bracket x minus pi over 2 plus 1. All right. So same step. My period is 2 pi divided by b, which is 2. So then I get pi. My amplitude, notice that there is a reflection this time, but my amplitude is the absolute value, so it's still 2. We just got to make sure that we address the reflection. So the reflection over the x-axis, normally a sine graph goes median up, comes back down like that. So what's going to happen this time with the reflection is it's going to be the median, but it's going to go down, come back. So that's with the reflection. So our fourth and fifth spot will like switch around essentially. Okay, the other thing is we have a shift. Can anybody tell me if it's left or right?
Right.
Yeah, shift right, pi over 2. And then the last thing to address is my k value is 1. So again, my k value is where I establish my median. So if it's at 1, everybody, do you understand? I've now established my scale on my y-axis as 1. So if I'm going up an amplitude of 2, I have to have it at the second tick here. Do you see? So then my maximum is going to be at 3. Okay, then I'm going to go down to, and my minimum is going to be at -1. So do you see my amplitude? This is very symmetrical, the graphs. Everything should be all mirrored. Everything should work out very nicely. Okay, so then my period is pi. So normally we would put at the 2-tick part. I say the 2-tick part. I kind of just put it like, you know, roughly, you know, wherever. So then we have halfway is the pi over 2. Now here's the thing. Because we got shifted right pi over 2, we're actually not starting at 0, we're starting at pi over 2. So that means maybe I didn't want to do it like this. Or I can extend this and put the next tick here at 3 pi over 2. Do you see? Because I need to have a period's worth. And a period is pi. So from pi over 2 to 3 pi over 2 is my period. I have to have that on my axis, at least one period, unless they tell you otherwise. Okay. Normally, sometimes they don't even give you a typed axis. You just draw it yourself. Okay, and that's what you'd be doing on your homework as well. Okay, so next thing, so we have our median, our max, our min. We've established our scale on our x-axis, right? So the thing is I don't have enough ticks here, so I'm going to put some extra ticks halfways. And I might, depending on, I might have to do even half of that. We'll see. Okay, so does everybody see the sine graph? We're starting, the first spot is the median that got shifted to the right, pi over 2. So normally it would be at 0, but everything got shifted. But now it's going to be at pi over 2. That's my first spot. A period later, which is 3 pi over 2, it'll be in the same spot right here. Do you see? There's my second spot. Then halfway is going to be my third spot. So normally I would be putting halfway between these at a max, but because it got reflected, it's now going to be at the minimum. Again, that's my fourth spot. My fifth spot normally would be in the minimum because it got reflected, it's at the maximum. So then join it all, and there we go. It has to be at least one period, so you have to go past those points. Okay, how are we doing there? All right, last example. This time they tell you need to show enough graph for 0 to 6. And notice it's closed intervals, so that means we're not going to have arrows this time. It's going to be endpoints. So here's my b. It's nicely factored too, so that's nice. So p is 2 pi divided by pi over 2. So if you know how to do keep, change, flip really easy, you probably know the answer already is 4. If you don't, write it out, 2 pi times, and then you flip pi over 2, so that would be 2 over pi. The pi's cancel, and you see I get 4 as my period. The other thing is it's a shift right 2. Notice there's no pi's in this. My period is 4, not 4 pi, 4. My shift is 2, no pi's in there, which means my x-axis here is going to have, say, a 4 there. And here's my 2, and then you can put 6 there. We know 6 is my ending, so then you can put the ticks between. So I'm actually going up by 1s here, right? The other thing here is 10, that is my amplitude, is 10. So you don't need to put 10 ticks, just put a 10 here and a negative 10 here, because I do not have a k is plus 0, so k is right on the axis. There's no additional shift that way, so that's kind of nice. I didn't really put my 10 tick there. Let me just change my 10 tick so it looks like it's even. Otherwise, it might look a little weird there. That's a little bit better. Okay, so it got shifted to the right too, and this is a cosine graph. So let's just refresh your memory on the cosine graph. The cosine graph starts at a max, and a period later it says max. Halfway is the min, halfway is the medians, okay? So there's no reflection, so we don't have to worry about that. So, except it got shifted to the right too. So that means its maximum is at 2. The period is 4, so 4, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4. It would be at its max again. Halfway between those two maxes is a minimum. Halfway between that third spot, the third spot and the first part is the median. And because it's telling me I need to graph from 0 to 6, I got to continue the pattern. So if the pattern's going like this, it's going to come back down and come to here. It's all symmetrical. Whoops. There we go. And then I'm done. Okay, so any questions on this?